But first, I just want to respond to a few of the comments that I've already gotten, and by the way, there's a lot that are just great, but a couple of them are raising an important point, and that is that it is difficult to follow along sometimes with this reader or this program, this software that is reading these texts.
As they place consumer civilization in judgment.
And I admit that it's not great. And if I had a huge platform and felt a huge responsibility for putting out only the most polished stuff, then I just wouldn't even do it, because I don't have the time to do the kind of polishing that would require putting the words together. Because I have the way that the reader that I use, I'm just using what I use to go to work. Like I would be making these just for me, but figure some people will appreciate them. I'm not going to do more work than what I'm willing to do for myself. And so I hope that people will still find it useful. But that being said, I still have put a lot of work in, a lot of effort. Like with that last one, I actually had to go and re-record several parts because the reading app, it was skipping the last sentence of every page. And I had to go back and type that out and blah blah blah. Anyway, so it's like there's stuff I have to do, but it's like if it comes down to like, oh, it's a little distracting. It's like everything's distracting. When the robot reader butchers a word, I just think it's funny now. But I also like am able to put the words back together in my head, and it's like I'm behind the scenes editing out the chapter breaks or the page breaks. So like it's actually worse than what you're hearing. When it gets to the end of the page, it like breaks and then it goes and it reads the top of the next page where like the chapter header or the title of the book and the page number before continuing. And it was like it took like 3 months of listening to books this way to finally, just like one day, my brain was just doing the extra work of kind of bookmarking where a sentence gets cut off and then after everything, picking up where it left off. And it's like, I'm actually able to follow along now, but I wouldn't have learned that if I was only listening to polished content. So to the 5 of you who appreciate it and eventually it will benefit, you're welcome. And to everybody else, I'm sorry. One of the most frustrating things about theory is that it's going to take so much time to be able to get to that level that author is writing at, that it's a muscle that would require continuous exercising. And so when you don't really have time, energy to be developing that muscle through sustained effort and sacrifice, it's just annoying. It's just frustrating. Nevertheless, though, some of us persist. And so, I've always tried to work jobs that allowed me to be able to listen to audiobooks. And so in construction, several different areas of the construction field that I worked in, I was able to listen to audiobooks or podcasts. And same thing goes for stocking grocery shelves at night, which was, I've had a lot of jobs, but that one I kept for a couple of years in my early 20s. And so I listened to a lot of books at the time, but it was like, it wasn't books. It was not books that were really challenging me, right? I did not listen to stuff that was challenging me. Like if I listened to self-help, or if I listened to I listened to a lot of self-help back then. I was very depressed. And so, I wasn't pushing it though. And there were just things that just looked absolutely incomprehensible. But then even after I studied philosophy for quite some time, like I tried to listen to Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit on Audible just for the hell of it. And it was like, I actually listened for a couple hours. It was absolutely incomprehensible. But then again, Hegel is among those people who you probably will never listen to unless you're like, there will be a few people who watch this video who probably someday will get their reading/listening comprehension to that level where they're able to just kind of like, yeah, I can listen to Hegel, and congratulations to you. I'm not there, but I have noticed throughout various stages of my life, there are times when I just grind through stuff that's incomprehensible, and then I come out the other side being like, oh my God, I think I know what's going on there now. And that usually, and one of the nice things about that is that it's transferable. That's a transferable skill in the sense that obviously, like having your comprehension go up for listening or reading some specific author, that author becomes those theories, whatever science or area of philosophy it might be, like it becomes more readily accessible, but so do adjacent works in that territory. So, and not necessarily in that territory. When your reading comprehension goes up for philosophy, it goes up for a lot of other things, and your listening comprehension goes up as well, meaning that in the same way that when you play chess, you can think ahead several moves. If you get better and better, you can think ahead way more moves, right? In a conversation, if your listening comprehension has gone up a lot, you see the structure of the conversation while you're having it, or maybe you feel that structure as you're having it, but like you're able to maintain several lines of thought along a longer series in time, and that this is the shit they don't want us to be doing, right? Like the university discourages this immensely. In fact, I'm going to post a few excerpts after this one, this week probably. One by Gramsci on the importance of organic intellectuals. Another excerpt right here, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire's chapter 1. There's a part where he's talking about the importance of coming into critical consciousness in a way that doesn't lead to fanaticism. And it's kind of the difference between being I don't need to characterize it right now. I was going to tie in the third reading, though. It's from Capitalist Realism, when Mark Fisher is talking about the difference between the regimented form of schooling that was training industrial workers as opposed to this new late-stage capitalism mode of preparing consumers and service sector workers, and the depressive sort of weird aimlessness that comes with it. And so that's something that I'll be getting into. But the point is that these institutions suffocate the longer train of thought. The point is that it's harder to focus now than it's ever been. The neoliberalization of the university has definitely gutted it in significant ways, made it a lot more challenging to even do anything if you go into all that debt for that education in the first place. Now, when I was there, I did, because I had spent so much time trying to avoid going into debt that when I finally decided to do it, I knew what was on the other side of working in the labor field, and knowing that like my life was absolutely miserable that way anyway. Well, now that I can listen to books though at this level, and that I've been introduced to like these broader fields of thought and the critique of political economy and critical theory and philosophy and all of these things that I'm so fascinated by. Now that I can listen to this stuff, it's like, well, I want to go back to working with my hands. I don't want to be doing video editing work for other people, because if I'm doing video editing work, I'm not able to listen to books. Whereas if I'm doing landscaping work, which is something I do for money, to bring in some money on the side. If I do landscaping work, I can listen to audiobooks. And so I told someone in the comment sections that this I see this as one piece of a lot of different pieces to a puzzle that is basically the emergence of a new American organic intellectual revolution. And when I say intellectual and when I say revolution, I'm using this in both of these words in a very loose way to say that the workers are listening to podcasts. The workers are listening to audiobooks already. And look, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, this theory, it's stupid, we don't need it. Yeah, but for the people who understand that it's necessary, for the people who are, or at least for the people who need it, right? Eventually you get tired of just listening to other people communicate with other people about cool things because they're based in something, and you want to get based as well. And at the time that you want to get based, okay, by the time you want to actually start approaching primary texts like original works by authors who are like the leading lights of their fields, at that point there have to be resources there. And so Theory Plebe has always been, in my eyes, a way of equipping people with important tools along that journey. And a lot of my content, you don't really need to be based in theory, but I do want to give people glimpses into what it's like. And I know that, like, for me, like, I remember when I tried to read John Stuart Mill, and I thought it was like really hard, like really, really, really hard. I was like, wow, it was so hard for me to focus, so hard for me to make sense of the weird way that he talked. And then later, because I had tried reading Heidegger and Levinas and, Marx and stuff like that, I go back to John Stuart Mill and I was like, oh, it's like cake. And it's like, well, I didn't follow a chronological order where I was like walking up some stairs, right? I didn't just, it wasn't like I followed it like grade by grade on the way up. There's just certain things that really spoke to me and really pulled me in. And, and I've spent a lot of time not understanding. And then, upon revisiting enough times, you start to get it, especially if you're watching videos, if you're having conversations with people. And, look, if you're working a job, with like a mundane job, like there's nothing going on like half the time, right? Like if you can manage it, if you can swing it, if you can get that, I'm not saying everyone can, a lot of people can't, but if you can, then you can repeat things. And so kind of what I see these excerpts as being is an opportunity to repeat things. If I was doing like the whole reading, which the Dank Audio Stash does do, which I love Dank Audio Stash, and I will link them below because you want to subscribe. But they have full readings there. Well, I just want to do excerpts because the point is that you struggle with it, you try to make sense of it, you ask critical questions of it, you talk about it in the comment section, and then I will draw off of that. I will do something where I break down the text in a stream that you will then get to watch, and then you can always revisit later. And you can stretch this out over years, where you listen to something and then like later you tune into the stream, then later you go back to it. It could be over the course of years, and then you come back and you're like, oh my God, like I totally get this now. It's amazing. It's
amazing.
That's right. So the last thing I wanted to say is something about retroversion, which the first 5 pages of Molly Ann Rothenberg's book here, The Excessive Subject, A New Theory of Social Change. The first 5 pages is setting forth the term retroversion, which she has basically teased out this sort of this concept from the works of so many important theorists from the 20th century, including some that are currently still alive. And what she's able to show with it is just, oh my God, it's very useful for getting out of a lot of classic pitfalls. But more importantly, it's important for getting over our little American like sense of having to start everything from the beginning, read through, understand, and then complete, and then finish it away as though it was like a product that you consumed, or like a bank that where it was deposited and you're just like the sort of passive receiver of it, or like it's just adding some kind of a feather in your cap because it's supposed to say something about you. The point is about retroversion is that nothing is supposed to just make transparent immediate sense. Things make sense as you gain a sense of orientation in the field of signifiers established, and that you might be focusing on whatever words are currently being said, but below the surface, all of those other words are still there, and your brain is working overtime more than you realize. And words don't just have definitive definitions in their own, standing alone. They're informed in relation to how they're being used to other things. And so if you listen through something a few times and you start to kind of get a feel for it, then you start to be like, I think I understand this word now. Is this word like that? And then you look it up, and half the time you're right? Half the time you're right. And you didn't even ever look up a definition, right? Now, of course, you will look like a fool if you start, confidently using these words, not knowing what you're doing with them. And I always kind of was worried about that and felt a great deal of imposter syndrome, and eventually just said, fuck it, I don't care anymore. I'll still try. And if people set me straight on like misusing something, that's fine. Though obviously I don't like super ideological, like this word just means that. End of story. It's like, no, this is philosophy. And so what we want to understand is what's the difference between this word and what it's trying to get at, and how different people are trying to get at different things and confusing themselves and getting bogged down in literal interpretations of one-dimensional outlooks. That's what we're against. That's not what we're for. But anyway, getting back to retroversion. It makes more and more sense the more you go back to it. And you can learn something that will then click a bunch of other stuff into place, and you didn't even realize that it happened. But then you're just like riding your bicycle or walking around one day, and it just like a flash of lightning, you have this idea. Sometimes you think that you have that on your own. Sometimes like later you realize, oh no, I just understand this concept now, right? Because you'll come back to something and you're like, oh wow, I thought, like wow, is that where I got this from? And it's great, because most of our time, what is made present to our consciousness, most of the time, is bulletin boards, is ads, is stuff that is meant to distract us, to make us feel addicted, to make us want to post, to like, to make our takes, to try to get attention. Most of the time, what that's doing is it's running counter to our deeper seated needs to explore our own selves and get a sense for the world we live in, so that we can figure out what our talents are, so that we can build on those with meaningful skills that will be able to help us contribute to the worlds that we live in, but also to ourselves, right? And so don't just let corporate entities that run the internet constantly direct stimulating, highly distracting rushes of dopamine and adrenaline into your brain unchecked. Because you're going to, look, if you're working at a job and you have the same thoughts occur to you over and over and over again. They say something like you think the same thought like 10,000 times a day. And it's, but it's happening at like, it's not exactly like at this conscious level. And it's like, inject some other crap into that. That's not your own thoughts in the first place. Like none of us are isolated, standalone, entirely separated entities from our broader world. Like the ideas in our heads, like internalized from the broader society. We have to get at those underlying presuppositional frameworks that contextualize and then inform the meanings that we're operating with, because those do direct our behavior. And if I deeply think that they do. It is pure ideology.
It's pure ideology
to think that we're not molded by the things that we take for granted, and that we would not benefit from digging deeper into the different ways that things give or gain meaning, and the ways in which things like social change are problematized by this concept, which is something that Rothenberg gets more into. Or to think that we should be keeping up with and reinterpreting and staying critical about fundamental concepts from the critique of political economy, and the ways that our society is currently developing into new modes that no one's ever experimented with. We have absolutely no no experience with these things, and we have no elders to turn to ask for guidance, because these are unique times in so many ways, like bioengineering, climate change, increased automation, making more and more sections of the labor force increasingly precarious. It's basically the lumpen proletarianization of everyone in the working class, and it's rough. It's rough, and what is the way forward? How do we reclaim time, which has currently been subsumed by value, where all of our social worlds, like all of our horizons of potential, every way we have of looking forward is limited by, one, our imagination, and two, structural stultification of our life world, meaning the lack or the negligence or being barred from having the critical tools, the conceptual resources necessary for making sense of our oppression, for understanding the fundamental structural mechanisms that drive abstract domination, ecological expropriation, and labor exploitation. How do we get to the bottom of this? How do we even start having those conversations? Well, while I'm trying to redirect my efforts away from video editing and towards listening to books while I'm working, that's one big part of it. I'm trying to reorchestrate and redirect myself so that I don't feel an incredible pressure and always like left behind by all the things that I want to be looking more into. I want to be able to actually do those things. And so it's like, yeah, something like farm work right now, or something like just landscaping work, which I will be doing pretty shortly here. That's really calling to me right now. And so, whether these resources I'm developing now are useful for you now or later, or for someone you know, or whatever. If they're not, then fine. But I hope that some people will be helped by this, and that ultimately, look, if you don't like the robot readers, don't worry. I expect you'll like the streams where I'm breaking the text down. But even then, that there's another level, because eventually when I feel like I've gotten a better sense for these things, because right now it's like, I know it's really important, I keep going back to it, but I can't like write about it in my own way yet. Well, once I'm able to, once I've not just read through it the first time, but also like the second time critically, and then the third time running it up against everything I know and critiquing it, like on the other end of all of that, eventually I'm able to write my own essays about that stuff. But I didn't want to keep, I was trying to like focus. I was like, I'll just write essays about stuff I feel confident about. And then it's like, no, I keep holding myself back from all the things I'm interested in right now. So there's like this 3-tier method now, where it's like we do an excerpt, then later we unpack that excerpt, and then later it's going to be integrated into either, well, probably both my book and like some kind of a video essay or documentary or something like that. And so, but I'm thinking way longer term now. I'm thinking out 5 years. And so these, like, right now, this series is like laying down a basis that I'm really excited to build off of, because we're going to get based. I need a sound effect for that on my soundboard. Because we're gonna get based. Based in the face. All right.
It's pure ideology.
Thanks for tuning in and for engaging with this content. I've been really appreciating the quality comments, the well thought out comments. So take care. Like, follow, subscribe.